okay, what's going to happen here? I got to get both of us out of here. We don't have another boat. I don't have another person to help us. What are we going to do? My daughter is very capable, but she's alone if I'm not here. How are we going to get out of here? And how am I going to take care of this situation? Because I'm kind of in charge. And I'd been the responsible one for the whole trip, planned it, and now I couldn't be in charge anymore. I couldn't take care of the situation.
I saw my dad just kind of like fall over, and I was like, I'll go get some help. And I didn't really know what was going on yet.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Paddle and Portage podcast. I'm here with M. Baxley.
That is the voice of Joe Fredericks himself. On this fine, cool, crisp morning on the wilderness edge, once again we find ourselves in a season of change.
Entering what many people, don't want to speak for you, but
Thank you.
for many people is the best, their favorite time to paddle in the Boundary Waters region, fall.
It marks a slowing down after a long push of summer.
Well, in the hot days, muggy, buggy, all of that goes with the joys of summer too, the swimming and the long nights and days and so forth. But there's also that other side of summer, that grind, where fall is more of this state of transition that you're referencing, but into something a little bit slower and shorter. It's crisp and the mornings are cool. We're both wearing a fleece and you've got a big flannel on this morning on top of your other layer. That it's just this sign, these indicators of this time of change.
Certainly comes sooner for us than most of our neighbors to the south, who are also transitioning. Mm-hmm. School starting for parents, and everybody's getting in their last little huzzah.
At the Minnesota State Fair, which is definitely a sign in this state, Minnesota, of the end of summer. Like the state fair marks that. And that's a long event. And Friends of the Boundary Waters had a booth at the state fair, as they do every year. They invited us to come down and hang out with them down there in years past and so forth. They had a huge map of the Boundary Waters, and they asked people to come choose their favorite lake. Tell us your favorite lake and why in the Boundary Waters. And I thought that was cool, and I had done something in the past where someone asked me that, and it's like, well, I'll tell you, but you're not going to tell anyone else, are you? In the sense of, don't tell them where I go fishing, for crying out loud.
No, that's a mistake.
But the Friends had done that, and I want to point out that they're a sponsor of this podcast, so thank you, Friends.
We're full of great support as we roll along. Grateful for each of our sponsors and for all of our listeners. Always got to take a moment to say that. And as we are full of gratitude at the changing season and all of our community, today's story is an example of the best and brightest, the most supportive way that our community gets to show up for each other in the wilderness when unexpected tragedy strikes, as it does once again.
Yeah, well, this was a pretty special trip. It was in part a fundraiser and awareness builder for Save the Boundary Waters. My name's Tim Reese, and I live in Minnetrista, Minnesota. We actually had put out there our goal of paddling 182 miles, the full border route trail from the entry point off Little Vermilion River to the takeout point on the Arrowhead Trail. We were trying to do it in 7 or 8 days. So, that's paddling 25 to 30 miles a day. It was just my daughter, who's 18, and she has done a number of trips with our family.
It kind of started off as what we were expecting. For a few days, we were just paddling like 20 to 25 miles a day. And yeah, it was pretty fun. My name is Sylvie, and I'm from Mound, Minnetrista.
She was interested and willing to take a trip with her dad, just the two of us. So I was excited.
It felt kind of nice just being able to paddle and just focus on one thing for like 8 hours a day. And we didn't have Wi-Fi, and it was like any other Boundary Waters trip, which is really relaxing.
It's a trip of a lifetime. I've had the full Mackenzie maps all assembled on my wall when I was a kid, and saw the little stars around the dangerous rapids on Basswood Falls, and labels for where the pictographs were. And I dreamed about doing this trip for decades. So it was it was sort of a bucket list kind of thing.
So it was definitely a lot more vigorous than what I had been used to, but I feel like it was kind of refreshing and a fun adventure. This was the only permit available, and he was like, "Why don't we just do the border route?" And I said, "Sure." That sounds like it'll be a week that I'll remember.
Support for this episode comes from Voyageur Canoe Outfitters, located at the end of the Gunflint Trail in Grand Marais. Voyageur outfits your Boundary Waters trip with as much or as little gear as needed. From fully furnished cabins near the wilderness line to complete outfitting canoe trips, Voyageur has you covered. Head to VoyageurOutfitters.com to book your vacation or call 218-388-2224. Mention Paddle and Portage Podcast and get 10% off your trip. Offer valid only on future reservations for the 2024 season. And support for Paddle and Portage comes from Ely Outfitting Company. Located in downtown Ely, their friendly and knowledgeable team shares expert Boundary Waters trip planning and routing advice. Ely Outfitting Company offers complete outfitting services, lightweight canoe rentals, and professionally guided tours. Now booking 2024 canoe trips. Plan your Boundary Waters trip now at elyoutfittingcompany.com. Successful Boundary Water canoe trips start with Ely Outfitting Company.
We had 5 incredible days of paddling. We covered all of Lac LaCroix our first day and camped across from the Irving Island pictographs. And it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous campsite. Saw the sort of afterglow change the light on those big cliffs on Irving Island.
I feel like for the whole trip up until my dad got hurt, it was just kind of like really calming. And that's always what I felt with the Boundary Waters, which is why I keep wanting to go back, is just because it's so relaxing, and like it just feels like your thoughts kind of quiet down.
Second day, we paddled most of the Basswood River, got to Lower Basswood Falls, and camped right across from the falls with a beautiful view of both falls.
It was like across the lake from a waterfall that was from another lake, and it was flowing down, and it was very pretty. It was just like a beautiful campsite, and there was kind of a thunderstorm for a short period in the evening, and it was just kind of really relaxing to lay in the tent. Yeah, it was just a beautiful campsite, and I think that's one of the biggest things I'll remember from before, especially when it's raining, because it's just really pretty to hear the raindrops on the tent and stuff. Yeah.
Next day, we made really great time and ended up in the Knife Lake chain, crossed the Prairie Portage, and headed up past Dorothy Moulter's Isle of Pines. Ended up not being able to get a campsite for quite a while. There was like a dozen full campsites. It's peak of the season. Finally got a campsite on Carp Lake at dusk, but we had covered 29 miles that day, so we were pretty excited. Had another great day. Made it into Saginaga. Made it all the way up and camped on a beautiful island in the middle of Saginaga Lake on Friday night. That was day 4 of the trip. Yeah, we were by that point about 8 to 10 miles ahead of our plan, so things were going great.
Enjoy this episode of Paddle and Portage, brought to you by Women's Wilderness Discovery in Ely, Minnesota, gateway to the Boundary Waters. Experience canoe country in all seasons with our outfitted guided trips and workshops. Visit us online at womenswildernessdiscovery.com, Instagram, and Facebook. Discover your inner strength outdoors.
It was a little different because I think it was a Saturday, and so it was a lot more busy, I noticed, because I think a lot more people were coming in and starting their trips going the opposite direction.
Yeah, Saturday, our 5th day, it was raining on and off kind of throughout the day. Nothing terrible. We didn't even need raincoats because it was warm, but it was definitely getting things wet, including the portages. And we started to encounter a lot more groups. I mean, it had been campsites had been full, but we hadn't been portaging that much. So the groups we encountered were not really much of a hindrance to our pace. But once we got into all those portages on the Granite River, we were having to wait.
I didn't really mind it. It was just fun to see a lot more people doing kind of the same thing as us and getting ready to enjoy a trip. So we were trying to get through the portages, like single trip them, because it was like we didn't want to like hold people up.
One portage, we just had our lunch sitting in the boat waiting for a group to get off the landing.
We were carrying a lot that day through the portages.
So I was starting to feel a little like, our pace was slowing down, but we had some extra time, so it wasn't stressful.
I remember this like rapids that we had to kind of climb over a bunch of rocks, and I think we tied the canoe. My dad had like a string, and he was just like pulling the canoe, and it was like knee deep or like maybe even hip deep in the water, just kind of going against this like rapid or like waterfall. But
I was getting a little frustrated with the number of groups on the portages.
And I remember kind of thinking, this feels a little bit like something could happen. And I had been having feelings like that before things happened. So I wasn't really like, I'm kind of feel bad to say this, but I didn't really feel surprised when he got injured, because I was like, well, I feel like this was bound to happen. And it's really horrible that it happened in the Boundary Waters.
We got to the Blueberry Portage, on the Granite River, very sort of notoriously rocky. It's got that rock slot that you have to sneak your way through, and it's kind of carved into the granite of the Granite River.
But because it was so wet and rainy, it was feeling, slippery, and kind of like maybe it's not a good idea to be going this fast. I'm not sure.
That was the portage where we got there, and there was a group that was clearly in the middle of portaging, heading back for their second trip. And I just decided I wasn't going to wait for them to get off, because they had sort of left the landing. So
we started off the portage, and it was all fine then. It was a little slippery on the ground.
I grabbed the lighter pack and the canoe, and my daughter grabbed the heavier pack, and we just took off on the portage. We were definitely in our routine.
We passed a couple of groups of people, and I remember this one. I said hi to this one group, and I said, have a good trip, and they were like, oh, we'll see you again because we're coming back.
There's a big granite slab on that portage that you have to cross, and as soon as I hit that, it was rain slicking, and I just started to slide. The weight on your shoulders starts to move, and you can't really control it. And before I could pitch it or drop or anything, my ankle rolled. It was kind of a slow motion thing. I could feel it happening, and then I heard the crunch, went down, and next thing I knew, I looked up, and my daughter was right behind me with a pretty stressed expression on her face, a big gasp when I looked down, and my foot was not where it should be. I saw my dad just kind of like fall over, and I was like, I'll go get some help. And I didn't really know what was going on yet. Okay, what's going to happen here? I got to get both of us out of here. We don't have another boat. I don't have another person to help us. What are we going to do? My daughter's very capable, but she's alone if I'm not here. How are we going to get out of here? And how am I going to take care of this situation? Because I'm kind of in charge. And I'd been the responsible one for the whole trip, planned it, and now I couldn't be in charge anymore. I couldn't take care of the situation. I was like, I'll go get some help. That same group of people, I was like, hey, I might need some help because I think that my dad hurt his leg. I kind of snapped it back into place, and she jumped right to and turned around, and within 3 minutes, she had found the other group on the portage. One group from England and then one group from Duluth came, and it was super lucky because I think multiple people had emergency response certifications. One of the members of the party just came right to me. He sat down and he started asking me all the classic first aid, just textbook first aid questions. This one man, Simon, knew exactly what to do, and he was just like super helpful, and he kept everyone calm. Checking out the scene to make sure everything was safe, organizing all the people to figure out who was going to do what. He just took charge. And he was this wonderful guy named Simon from the Lakes District of the UK. So he had this just excellent accent that just made me smile. And he was just a warm, genuine person.
So he was just kind of asking me to like grab things like a tarp and like tape out of the bag. And I kind of knew where things were. So I was just kind of on the duty of grabbing things and rolling them up. And he made a brace for my dad's foot.
When he got my foot wrapped, he did it so well that I was like, I'm not in pain. I can participate in this whole process and help make sure that we take care of what needs to be taken care of, because I could think clearly.
This episode brought to you by Sawtooth Outfitters, conveniently located right on Highway 61 in Tofty. Whether it's your first trip or you are an experienced Voyager, they are here to outfit you with the right gear and knowledge to ensure an unforgettable trip. From their ultralight canoe rentals to their outdoor gear stocked with clothing, gear, maps, and souvenirs, they have you covered. They literally have me covered with the wool that I wear into the boundary waters on this next trip and the paddles that come along with me in the canoe. It's not too late to plan a trip. Check out sawtoothoutfitters.com or give them a call to start planning today.
Finally, after about 3 minutes, I said, are you like a EMT? What's your story? He said, well, I've been teaching first aid for about 20 years, so I kind of know what I'm doing. I realized I didn't have to be in charge. Somebody else had taken over and was going to figure this all out. And it was the most reassuring feeling ever, because it was clear he knew what he was doing.
After that, it was all just kind of about how to get out of the zone in the boundary waters where you can't get like a motorboat to help us. But because they were so like prepared and knew exactly what to do, we didn't even really have to use our Garmin.
Within the first few minutes, those guys said, no, we can take care of this. We don't need to call search and rescue. We've got some expertise. Somebody got up on the crest of the hill and was able to get cell reception, called the Gunflint Lodge. And the Gunflint Lodge said, we'll meet you at the end of Magnetic Lake with our motorboat. If you guys can get him to there, we'll get him the rest of the way.
We tried to get through the last 2 portages. And I remember paddling in a canoe with Glenn, I think was his name. And we brought my dad in this canoe through the 2 portages. And mostly I was just kind of carrying this stuff. But the 3 other guys that came with us kind of held on to my dad. And I think Simon held on to his leg. And they were rocky, steep portages.
2 people sort of supporting my shoulders, and Simon, the first aid instructor, basically carrying my foot the whole way and making sure it didn't get dropped or bump anything or be in pain. And these are difficult portages, and I'm 175 pounds. So this was not a simple task.
I'm not going to say it was like easy to get out of there, but it was quick and kind of matter of fact.
I think one of the best parts of it is that we ended up having an hour and a half to chat in this sort of, suddenly we were bonded, and we were there having conversations about lots of things because I was able to be coherent.
After we got through those 2 portages, this motorboat and a couple of emergency responders from the Gunflint Lodge just picked us up and brought us there.
I was at the emergency department at the hospital probably 3 hours after my fall, with my foot set in a very competent brace and all the logistics figured out.
Throughout the whole process, which it only took like a couple of hours to get back out of the boundary waters and within phone service, the whole time I just felt really like we got lucky because we were able to kind of figure the situation out pretty quickly. And I think mostly I just felt grateful and relieved that it wasn't like we were in the middle of some super remote area and nobody was there.
There's suddenly this little instant community of people who were total strangers. The people's generosity that came out of the woodwork was amazing.
Probably what I'm going to remember or like take away from this whole situation is that it's like really good to know what to do in an emergency, because you never know what is going to happen, especially in these big wilderness adventures. This is probably my first big, wilderness adventure. Just knowing that this happens regularly, I think it's good to know what to do in a situation like this, and definitely that you have to stay calm and just kind of immediately figure out what you need to start focusing on to fix the situation.
I'm hoping that I can talk my daughter into someday going up to Gunflint and taking a few days, taking it probably more slowly and spending more time fishing and just hanging out at campsites, but finishing the rest of that route.
And also, I think, again, that to trust your gut, or to like just kind of have a little bit of foresight, is important, especially in a remote area like that. But also, I'm just like really grateful that we were on that portage with all those people.
It's really, the Boundary Waters is an amazing place, and we all know it's really special. And it's special for a lot of reasons, I think, because it's a one of a kind and it's preserved wilderness. And yeah, I thought it was pretty ironic that as a pretty big wilderness advocate, I both started and ended this trip in a motorboat. It wasn't really the plan. So it's complicated. There's lots of different ways the Boundary Waters is utilized by the people who love it. People love it for different reasons. And sometimes there's controversy over decisions that should be made, like the copper nickel mine. Is that there's people who believe it's good for the local economy, but a lot of us think, I think with what's going on with wilderness tripping and what makes this place special is really what it's valuable for. So we want to protect that and preserve it. But there's anytime you get involved with community, there's a lot of complications, and often that leads to us being divisive and finding our differences. But in this case, it was about just common humanity.
I'm grateful that they knew what to do and knew how to help my dad, and kind of took initiative, even though they didn't really know him or me, and kind of cared enough to spend that much time getting us back into a place where we could go. So yeah, I'm really, really thankful, and I hope that they hear that somehow.
Kind of restored my faith in humanity. And there's a lot of people doing a lot of ugly things right now, but when you have an experience like this, you're like, no, people are good. People are good. Like I said, I had the maps of the Boundary Waters on my wall as a kid. It's like this mythical place that just draws people up there, draws people together. Yeah, I think gives us this common thing that means a lot to a lot of people.
I hope it never gets old for anyone, the way we get all sappy about this place and the type of community it brings together. I certainly get emotional every time I hear these stories. It's why I do it.
I think that it only becomes richer and more full the more we talk about these and experience them for ourselves, hear these types of stories as we did today about, I think the reason it's easy, for me at least, is that I can envision twisting my ankle on a place like the Granite River, and what would I do if I was out there and needed help? It's easy to jump into that scene, and it makes it relatable in a way that it's just familiar, comfortable, even when it's a dangerous or scary situation like this.
Absolutely. There were so many people who stepped up to make this rescue smooth, successful, from the individuals on their trips to the folks at Gunflint Lodge and the Gunflint Trail Fire Department. If you were involved in this experience, both Tim and Sylvie want to hear from you. And they gave us permission to invite you to reach out to Paddle and Portage to help make that connection, to help express that gratitude. So please get a hold of us through the website. Email joe@paddleandportage.com. I want to complete the circle. Recognize all of you for your work.
Yeah, if you were there on the scene or you know someone, how to get a hold of them, please share this episode with them. Or if you are the person involved or one of the people, indeed, Paddle and Portage, Instagram, Facebook, or as Em said, joe@paddleandportage.com. You know, I think the part two that I really appreciated about this story and showing the strength of the paddling community to work together in crisis and hard times is often we only hear those stories through the lens of search and rescue, and that we were able to step back in this episode and say there wasn't that component of this. There wasn't a call where maybe search and rescue didn't need to come in, because we hear some of that even from people like Rick Slatton at the St. Louis County Rescue Squad with the guy who lost his paddle. It's a story that Rick tells often. Paddle and Portage, he shared it multiple times in other media. The guy lost his paddle, hit search and the beacon. They come in. I lost my paddle. He's having coffee at camp or whatever. The volunteers have paddled in 5 lakes, and you need a paddle. You didn't figure it out. It's a thing like that. Or the guy who took mushrooms up near Seagull this summer and they hit search and rescue. Like, those stories get a lot of attention. Or a situation like, obviously, at Curtin Falls, where search and rescue comes in and does what they do, or the young boy on Snipe Lake where the tree hit him in the head in the thunderstorm in June. Like, those are search and rescue stories that they go in and they do something. Then there's this, and this probably happens a lot more than is even recognized, certainly here on the podcast. These stories don't get shared publicly oftentimes.
They are worth celebrating every single time that we get a chance to highlight the skillfulness, the responsiveness, the support that happens in this community, in the place that we all rally around. We want to hear about it. We always want to hear about it. It's so funny. I heard about this because, I know 2 people directly involved with my pal Eric, who drove Tim down the Gunflint so he didn't have to ride and take an ambulance. My pal Elise, who put Tim up for the night. This is just who we are, and what we get to do as part of our daily lives. But we don't know everybody. So you got to tell us.
That's right. Yeah. Same method. Reach out to us on social media or email. Been hearing from a lot of people in the past 6 weeks in particular, it seems like, with people with story ideas or talking about some of the recent episodes, the Dan Cook episode, Tom McCann and the short track with Janice Matichuk, the letter from Cache Bay that Tom wrote and read. So
juicy, good stuff.
Yeah, so love to hear the feedback, and
keep it coming, folks.
Keep it coming. This has been so great now that we're into the teens on the episodes here and rolling along into the fall. And let's
the heck?
It's a bull moose. It's a bull moose.
At least you could have said a bear. That'd be more likely.